Hey guys, welcome to the first high-click podcast we're doing on the blog. Today I have Shane Melaugh from IamImpact.com. He's pretty well known for both his blog and his most popular product, which is Hybrid Connect. I reviewed it earlier this month. Shane blogs a lot about building and selling products. And also one thing I really like about him is that he's promoting hustle and skills and all these make money from home on autopilot kind of stuff. So I really wanted to have him for the first podcast. So thank you, Shane, for coming.
Thanks for having me, Gael. Very cool to be here.
No problem. Can you introduce yourself a little bit more? Is there anything else I missed in your introduction, or do you want to say anything else?
Well, no, I don't know. I'm a fan of short introductions, right? Because who wants to hear me talk about me? Like.
All right, let's keep it short then. Well, this interview is going to be focused on lead marketing. So that's something I really like, and I've been really following for the past 2 years. And we had good success with it, and I like to show it around. So I'm just going to start with the first basic question, which is you mentioned Lean Startup a lot in your blog posts, your videos. You made an infographic about minimum viable products. So for marketers, and mostly for marketers, what do you think are the main takeaways of the methods, and what really they should focus on?
I think the most important thing that is also usually an early learning for anyone who does something entrepreneurial is that you have to get out of your head and into other people's head, right? That's like marketing basics, right? Mm-hmm. You have to know what people in your target market are thinking and what they want and so on. And the thing is, I think we have to realize that people are generally pretty bad at making correct predictions. If I just sit here and I think, what might someone in this target market want, even if and I can use sophisticated methods for thinking about it and I can be very systematic and disciplined in writing down all of my ideas and so on. But as soon as I confront this theory with reality, it's probably going to turn out to be 95% wrong. Mm-hmm. And the best way to cure this is to just make the confrontation with the real world happen as soon as possible. And I think that's the core takeaway from all of this lean stuff, is that as soon as possible, as early as possible in the process, you want to get a feedback loop going. You want to be in a position where the people who will ultimately be paying the bills are telling you in some form what they want and what's good about your product and what is it. And that can be very directly, that can be you actually asking them and them telling you, but it can also be indirectly via analytics, for example, right? I mean, even the simplest form of analytics, right? You add a new navigation element to your website, and you will get feedback because you'll see what things people click on, or you'll see that everybody ignores the new navigation or something like that, right?
Yeah. Have you? I have a question. Have you worked with clients before? I know you've talked about doing some sales consulting at some point or something like that.
No, I've never really done proper client work. That has never been my business. I have done some consulting work. I did for Swiss Made Marketing, a company that was started about 3 years ago. I was a co-founder there, and I was kind of in a consulting position for about 1.5 years. Okay. But I've never done.
The question,
yeah.
Sorry, the reason I'm asking is because very often, marketers will adopt that position, but then convincing the management that they shouldn't do an 18-month a business plan and do all these things tends to be complicated. And I wanted to know, if you get on board with all these principles, how would you convince someone that's not necessarily versed in all these things to follow that kind of approach when they have a more traditional business background where you plan a lot ahead and you have to budget everything 6 months in advance and all of that, which is, quite difficult sometimes in terms of marketing.
Well, what comes to mind is two things. On the one hand, that you can offer it as a very, very low risk and potentially high yield strategy, right? You can say, look, if this goes completely wrong, we'll have risked almost nothing. We can try this And because it isn't the kind of, you're not suggesting, hey, let's do a different 18-month strategy, and if things go badly after 18 months, we're sitting here and we have nothing. You're suggesting something that, whether it goes right or wrong, it's going to be done very, very quickly. So I think that's an angle you need to take. And the other thing is, for any situation like that, it's always, one of the ways I think about these things is basically it's a sales process, right? If you're in this company, or you're working with clients or whatever, you are trying to sell this specific idea to usually one important key player, right? The person who is the most important person in whether this decision is made or not. And you can think of it as a selling process to that one person. And it's the same marketing principles apply. You want to find out who is my target market, who is this person, what do they want? How can I sell them this idea so that it's something that is in line with how they think about the world and with what their personal goals are.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So we've talked a lot about like theory right now, but can you give us a little bit more concrete examples on how you ran some of these things for some of your product or your blog, or I know you recently launched a community and all these things. So like, can you give us a little bit of like concrete examples of that?
Yeah. Okay. So a typical thing that I will do is that I will simply do like one-on-one. I'll try to get one-on-one feedback going. So I remember reading somewhere that some study was done, and the results were that in, I think, one-on-one discussions with 8 people would yield about 80 or 90% of the same depth and accuracy of data as a extended professional large-scale focus group research study type thing would. Okay, so even just having in-depth real personal discussions with a small group of people in your target market will yield a lot of highly valuable data, and that's something I take on board. So for example, right now I'm working on a theme club selling WordPress themes, and as part of that I simply invited people on my mailing list. I basically said, hey, look, I'm a bit of a theme addict, right? I buy themes all the time and I obsess about them and so on. And I was basically saying, if you're like that too, if you love themes and you buy too many of them and all that, get in touch and we'll get on Skype and we'll talk about themes and we'll try to find out like what's the perfect theme to you, what do you look for, and so on. And I just have a bunch of one-on-one discussions with people, which I can do before even any development work or anything starts.
Yeah, it's pretty much free.
And it's free to do, yeah.
Yeah, when like these big panel polling usually costs thousands of dollars.
Exactly. So, and the other cool thing about this is, even I have a mailing list, which is very handy for this kind of thing, right? So I'll get a response very quickly. But the thing is, and this is also thinking of the principle that I think Seth Godin, I think it's in Tribes where he talks about how he has this concept of, that ideas spread like viruses, and your product and branding can also spread like a virus. And there are important, like the sneezers, he calls them, right? The people who sneeze and infect other people, essentially. And those are usually the enthusiasts. And the cool thing is that your enthusiasts, especially in the beginning, like the super enthusiastic people, are very important. And it's very easy to get information from them because they love talking about the thing, right? So I'm talking to people who want to talk about WordPress themes anyway. So even if I didn't have this mailing list, I could go on a forum and say, hey, where are the theme freaks? Let's have a talk, and they'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, I have a question about forums and everything, so it's perfect. Good transition. I was gonna ask you, like, do you use online communities to get that kind of feedback, whether it's for a product or it's for even a piece of content or whatever? Like, how do you use the social web and people discussing around to get feedback and get like viable ideas, pretty much?
I have used that in some ways. So for a completely different product, this was quite a long time ago, in a different market where I didn't have like access to a mailing list or anything like that. I did searches, tried to find out where are the forums that on this topic that people hang out, and I started participating there. and just started and invited people there and got on Skype calls with people from these forums. So that's definitely something I do. Social media is always been like I'm social media challenged. This has never been like a thing for me. But well, one thing we've done is we've actually my business partner Paul created like a script that would crawl through blogs and check which are the most socially shared posts on the blogs, which is another way of kind of using the social web in a sense to try and figure out what makes people tick, what they respond to, what they share, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's a good way to do that. We actually tend to do that for content as well. We kind of like take really big news sites, etc., find what gets the most shares and stuff, and then just create content for our clients or our own sites.
Right, exactly.
That kind of like answers to that post, and then you just go and comment, dropping your link, and it's like instant traction.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So yeah, but I find it very useful. One thing I wanted to ask as well, which is going back a little bit to the more theoretical stuff, is how do you go about pivoting and persevering? Like, how do you when do you say, okay, that's enough, that's not gonna work, or when do you say, I need to change this and this, and how do you decide that based on metrics or something?
In my case, it's usually I've very rarely had a situation where I'm like standing in front of this decision. Should we pivot or should we persevere? Because what usually happens is that it becomes an urgent need, right? You release your iteration or version of the product you have, you release that out. And this is my experience is that, then all these people come knocking on your door saying, why doesn't your product do this? Why don't you do this? This is terrible. This isn't working for me. I need this. And it's not like you're not sitting there, oh, should we pivot? It's like everybody's screaming for this. We have to. We need this done yesterday.
Yeah.
So
so how do you explain that sometimes you're gonna poll people before you create a product, and then you're gonna release it, and you're gonna get that kind of urgent feedback? Is there like still a difference between the way we're polling people and the way we're actually selling them stuff and how they react and stuff? Have you?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a difference between what people self-report and what they actually end up really doing and really needing. And it's always going to be different once it's actually in practical use, once people are actually there and using it, and it's in the trenches, so to speak. A different set of problems and demands and so on tend to arise. And one of the issues with polling that you have to be very careful about is that when you ask people, you have to be careful about what you ask them and how you ask them, because when you ask people, most people will say yes to everything that's an addition, right? And often will also suggest additions. Why doesn't your product also do X, Y, and Z? But to me, polling isn't the place to do like feature additions, right? Because essentially everybody will say yes, add stuff, add everything. But then if you follow their advice and you add everything, and let's say your application becomes slow and clunky and complicated with menus that nobody can navigate anymore because you've got all these features now all of a sudden, and it turns out almost nobody uses them, then that's not very useful. So that's something where I'm always very careful when people make suggestions for how to add stuff. That's something I'm very careful of. For reporting, I think the most important thing is how feedback you get on how people would like to see changes to the stuff that's already there. And for feature additions, I want to rely more on actual usage data. And I want to more, kind of rely.
So basically, your initial polling is more about is there a market for this thing, and that's pretty much the only question you're answering. And then you release something as early as possible, and then once you get the feedback of people saying, "Hey, I need to add this, we need this, etc.," and they screaming at you, then that's when you actually work on features.
Yeah, and it's like the initial polling, especially when you just talk to people one-on-one. It's also finding the target market, right? Because, so for example, I mean, let's take, I'll take a hypothetical example, but I'll use WordPress themes, right? Let's say I have an idea for, okay, I want to make like really cool blogging themes, right? So that bloggers can have awesome WordPress themes. And then I start talking to people and I start realizing, okay, so, you know, this person works with local clients, this person works with local clients, this person has a lead generation website, nobody has a blog. So maybe I shouldn't make blogging themes, right? So it's kind of finding that direction there.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So it's more about finding the right target market and the basic features. But at least the problem is what your product should solve, and then after that you work on features based on MVP features.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think that makes sense. All right, to go to the next question. I think I interviewed Ren Fishkin from Moz, who said that he actually liked vanity metrics, and specifically like quoting social signals. And he said, oh, that's great for businesses. They see what works, what doesn't, etc. And I kind of think that your opinion is going to differ a little bit, and that's why I just want your reaction on that.
Yeah, I think vanity metrics are pretty dangerous, yeah, because it's very easy to get caught up in that. And an example is actually from my actual business. If I show you the vanity metrics of my business, that is really nothing to show off. You know, I don't have any cool screenshots where the traffic graph goes like that. My social, I mean, as I said, you know, I'm socially challenged. My social sharing stats are just abysmally bad. Right? I will easily have, I mean, on average, I think, unless I bribe people, I get like a dozen shares or so on a piece of content.
We should swap notes about that because I get the shares, but I never get comments, for example. So.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, right? On my blog, you can find posts that have like 100 or 200 comments and 12 shares. So,
which I don't know how you do that, to be honest.
Right. I don't know. So maybe people just do one or the other, right? They go, if I've written a comment, I'm not going to also share this or something. I don't know. But the thing is, so yeah, you know, if you look at the vanity metrics on my business, it looks very dreary. But the actual, you know, the actual money that's being made is very, very good, and is really in no connection with the vanity metrics, right?
You don't see a rise of like, you know, when your traffic, like you probably see traffic rises correlate with sales rises, but you don't see that with like social shares or comments or stuff like that. Right?
Exactly. This was what I was about to say. You know, if I got 200 likes on my next post, I wouldn't get a single additional sale, right? And the problem, I think the biggest problem with vanity metrics, of course, they can be, you know, they can be useful, like we said, for research, for example. But the biggest problem is that it's very easy for us. I mean, we have this, it's the Skinner box problem, right? Which, you know, interestingly, if you look at games, especially these kind of the mobile games, the free-to-play games and so on, most of these are exploits of operational conditioning, which is just a psychological trigger. We get conditioned to want to get more points, right? That's the basis of the game, right? You play some game, you get points and some nice sound effect, and this is conditioning your brain to want more points. And the same thing can very easily happen with vanity metrics, right? You want more shares and you want more traffic and you want more comments, and you can go chasing down rabbit holes to get more of this stuff, and you forget about actually it doesn't matter, and actually I should just you know, build better products, get more customers and serve those customers better. I
actually think most marketers make the difference, but the problem is when they have managers that are not necessarily as well educated about that and so on. And one thing I've seen working with a lot of clients is that actually you get managers that get objectives of raising social shares by 30% or something for non-ads based business. You know, if you're paid per view, then like I guess it makes sense. But you know, for businesses that sell products and services and stuff, and I think one of the main challenge for marketers is to actually make people around them understand, when they understand themselves, what the problem is with that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a good point, especially people who aren't, and I think they're the Skinner box problem is bigger, because that's the first thing you see, especially when you have your social sharing widgets on the page. Everybody can see that, and everybody feels like, well, bigger numbers are better, right?
Yeah. And it looks cool. It looks like you're successful. So
exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're on the same page on that. I just think that what Ren Fishkin meant was more about like once you can establish a correlation between real business metrics and that kind of vanity metrics, and not that, but you need to establish that connection first.
Sure.
So, for example, probably traffic has some correlation with sales for you, but not necessarily social signals.
Yeah, but again, you know, even there, it depends very, very much on where the traffic comes from and where it's going to. If you have, I think you know, very, very rarely, but you know, every once in a while, whatever, some post or something will pick up maybe on some social network or something, and it'll get, you know, they get like this spike of traffic because it's being shared around. You won't get a spike of sales because of that though. So
yeah,
it's always been tricky.
All right. So recently, you've been mostly releasing software products. You've been releasing WordPress plugins mostly, and now you're going for the themes and all of that. And back in the day, you used to release more information products.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, why did you transition? And what's the fundamental difference between selling that kind of software versus selling information products these days?
The reason I transitioned is mainly because I wanted to, right? I prefer creating and selling software. It's like a more interesting challenge to me. Mm-hmm. But also I prefer selling something that's more tangible, and I think that's also an advantage in selling software. Of course, you can sell information, and people will happily buy information, but I think to a certain degree, it's always a little bit easier to sell software or any, you know, or physical products or something that's more tangible than information, right? So that's definitely an advantage. But yeah, it was mainly the main reason is just that I think information products, and it was the right thing for me to start with as well, because information products are very low investment, very easy to get started, and I learned that was like the proving ground for, you know, my marketing skills and some of the basic technical skills that are required to set up these sites and make sure, you know, the sales process works and so on. So it was a very good practice run, so to speak, for me to start with.
It's almost an MVP of your existing business today.
Sorry, what?
Because it was easier. It's almost an MVP of your existing business as it is today.
Yes,
because
yes, yeah.
It's the same skills, just at a much lower investment.
Exactly, and you know, as you said, I have a very strong emphasis on the hustle, or on the grind, as I call it. Mm-hmm. And that's it. You know, at some point, I decided that what I wanted to learn was how to create and sell really good products. And the way I taught myself that is by doing a lot of it, right? So I released information products, and I started releasing software products, and I did many of them. And now, you know, only with like HyperConnect was a product which is like a very long-term product. Like the longest, I had an information product that I kept developing for about 2 years. With HyperConnect, it's very likely that, you know, we'll keep developing it for longer than 2 years. With the theme club that we're working on now, the goal is that will go on for a very long time. So that now I'm starting to narrow my focus, where I'll be spending more time on fewer products, but I spent more time on many different products in the beginning to kind of get the practice in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that makes sense. So what's I guess in terms of sales especially, what do you feel is the difference between information products and that kind of software product? You say one is like a tangible solution, while the other one is information. Yeah. But in terms of sales specifically, like selling it.
Well, it's difficult to make a comparison, right? Because it's always it's always an apples to oranges comparison.
Yeah.
But I do think that as I said, it's a bit easier. It's a bit easier to sell to sell tangible products or software products. Just in terms of creating the sales message and getting the visitor to the point where they happily spend the money is a bit easier with software.
Okay. Okay. One of the common problems that my marketer friends have. I have a bunch of Skype rooms where I talk to them, etc. It's not really the marketing. It's mostly that they really struggle to build a quality product. And they usually they don't know where to start, and they're just not even product builders by themselves. Right. And I know that in some of your webinars and some of your blog posts, you've mentioned about using Odesks and marketplaces to outsource product production. So if you could just outline your process a little bit, then I think that would be useful to a bunch of people.
Yes, okay. So as you say, I've hired a lot of people through Odesk and similar marketplaces like that. And so right away, I can't give you like a secret formula, because what everybody will tell you is that it's very, very difficult to find good people. And, there's Sturgeon's law, which says 90% of everything is crap. And that's certainly true with trying to find talent, right? 90% of the people that you find, if you post a job on Odesk, for example, certainly 90% of the people at least who apply for the job are not going to be good for the job, especially not if you know.
Same everywhere. Yeah. Trust me. I mean, I interview people every day.
Right. So certainly, especially, if you really want to create high quality stuff, most of the people will simply not be qualified. So what's really important is having very, very strong filters in the beginning, right? So you want to be, basically you kick out people as potential candidates for the slightest thing, right? For the slightest thing, you kick them out immediately. And the other thing is, so you put your job out there, you get all these applications, you kick out all of them where you find any excuse to kick them out, basically. Okay. You're left with a few, and then you hire them by trial. So I've never hired someone, like, oh, come on board, we have this big plugin project that we're working on, you'll be the developer here. Never. It's always in the hiring process, I'll send them some test questions and whatnot to see how they handle certain things. And then if they get hired, it's always, like, we're going to do a trial hire for 2 weeks or something like that. We're going to have you do some very small project, maybe something I don't even want to sell it. I don't even want this piece of software. I just want you to build it to see if you can do it. Right? So something really small, or I'll give them something that we already have and say, I want you to add a feature here. I want you to do a fix here. And in the beginning, we're hovering over them and watching what they're doing all the time to try and figure out, are they good at what they do, right? And so they have to deliver good work before we properly hire them.
And then you hire them for a long term and different projects. So
even then, we don't hire them long term, right?
Okay.
Basically, everybody, so far anyway, everybody on my team is always only a few weeks away from getting kicked off again. I would prefer it not to be like that. The biggest problem I have is trying to find people who are intrinsically motivated, right? That's what you really want. Is you want someone who, if I tell them I want to create a WordPress theme, they automatically think for themselves, I want to create the best WordPress theme anyone's ever made. I want to hire the kind of people, if I tell them, well, never mind the details, right? We can make a mediocre theme. They would say, no, I'm not going to make a mediocre theme. I'd rather quit this job than make a mediocre theme, right?
Is that what you do to hire people?
No, I've never tried that before, but that might be a way to do that. But that's the most difficult thing, right? But the other thing that also works, even though that's a lot less cool, is if it's very clear to people that they're hired based on their performance. If the performance goes down, they're not hired anymore.
Okay. And in terms of finding these people, you just kick them out as soon as you have a reason, and that's it. Okay, I assume that makes sense. Yeah. Also, to just follow up on the product creation thing, once you figured out how to create your product, we see a lot of like quote unquote IM launches these days, which are pretty terrible usually. And I'd just like to know, like, according to you, with all the experience you have, what's the number one mistake that people make in general when they launch products, and what's the easiest way to fix it usually?
That's a good question. Yeah. Mm, well, I think, if I'm trying to think of all the people I've worked with and talked to about this kind of thing, I think the biggest mistake, or the most common mistake, is that people don't launch,
Hmm.
right? That an idea remains in idea phase or in refining or developing and then gets shelved again and so on forever. I think that's probably the most common thing that happens, where it goes wrong. And the way to fix that is to really initially to be very, very minimal in your minimum viable product. And what's good is if you can give yourself if you can put yourself under pressure, that's always good. So for
Hmm.
example, like a very good example to solve this problem would be you pitch your product to people as if it existed, and you don't even tell them that it doesn't exist yet. And you actually pitch it to the point where you make a sale. So your goal would be to get someone to sign a contract with you or give you money for this product that you haven't made yet. And now you have to deliver, right? Now you have to deliver something because they've
Okay,
paid you for it. And
I guess that.
this would work with, this would better work with service-based business or
Yeah.
B2B type thing than with,
It's actually something we do a lot, actually.
yeah.
It's just like we'll have meetings with like the team. We're doing a lot of like inbound marketing stuff.
Mhm.
We're doing all this guest posting, etc. And recently we launched this blog management service, which is essentially for businesses to, that leave their blog alone and never touch it, to just have like some decent content, and we find the right people, we promote it, we do all that. And actually that product came up because some clients said, hey, I love your guest post. It's like way better than the content on my blog. Can you try it out? And it's like we actually have to pitch them and just do this out, and eventually became a product. So yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's more services based, because if you pitch some piece of software or something, I mean, you never know what you're going to run into if you rely on
Exactly.
APIs and stuff, and all of a sudden the API doesn't work anymore. It could be a little bit
Exactly.
tricky.
So that doesn't work for everything, but I think the point is, if you can put yourself in a position where the discomfort of not getting your product launched is greater than the discomfort of having to work on it and getting it launched, that's always good, right?
Yeah.
Now, if it's something like software, there's still a way to put that pressure on yourself and build that discomfort of not doing anything, which would be the way Buffer was launched, right? They basically also pretended like this already existed, but then if you clicked on sign up here, it went to a page that said, sorry, this doesn't exist yet, but you can you can leave your email address and we will notify you when it's ready. Now, if you can do something like that, you can actually get some leads to show interest, and then you have a mailing list of a few people who are waiting for this product, and this would work for a software product. Another thing you could do, you could send out an email and say, okay, the product will be ready, and then set a date,
Yeah.
right? And now you've promised that it's there. You could even create an autoresponder sequence that kind of, leads up to the date and announces it and launches it, to put yourself in that position where you just have to.
Yeah.
You just
You
have
just
to.
need to put some external pressure on
Yeah,
yourself. Pretty
yeah,
much. Because if you just rely on yourself, like being entrepreneur, etc., sometimes you can go lazy with it.
yeah. And it's also, you will, if you don't put any pressure on yourself, then you will always find 1,000 excuses. You want to do some more research, or you want to refine it, you want to make it a bit better, blah blah blah, and it's not, it's almost a form of self-sabotage, but it's not intentional at all. And also, there's, how they say that, I don't know who said this. Is it Peter Drucker maybe? Any task will expand to fill the time allotted for it.
I can't. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was like Parkinson or something.
That's possibly. I can't remember who that was. But anyway,
Yeah.
this is very true, right? And that's one of the problems. If you're like, okay, I have this idea, and one day I'm going to develop this and sell this, you're basically giving it an unlimited amount of time, and so the task will stretch to fill an unlimited amount of time.
And I think it's like kind of like comfortable to stay in that stage where you're like, hey, I'm gonna do that. It's gonna be great,
Yeah,
etc.
exactly.
You don't have
Yeah,
to put yourself to the judgment of others.
exactly.
And yeah, I agree. I've been trapped in that once or twice.
Oh,
So
I'm there all the time. That's why I mean that's why I
yeah,
have all these strategies to get myself out of it, right? Because
exactly.
otherwise I
All right, the next one, I think I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's, according to you, should marketers learn how to code? Because that's kind of like, especially in the inbound marketing industry, you have on one side you have the ex-developers, and on the other side you have the ex-quote-unquote marketers, and it's like kind of like a clash, and the developers try to show off, and the marketers try to show off, and people are kind of lost in between very often.
they no they shouldn't. And so what they should do, what both developers and marketers should do is they should learn to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is with development and marketing, both of these are very complex skills, very
Mm-hmm.
complex creative skills, and also complex creative skills that tend to attract very different types of people. And you can easily spend a lifetime attaining mastery of one of these skills. And if you want to try both, if you want to do both of them, you're simply diluting your time and focus, and you're going to be, a not very good marketer with not very good coding skills, rather than an excellent marketer who hires an excellent or works together with an excellent developer. So I do believe in specialization there, and what you need to do, and this is also something that I work on all the time, is to make sure that I learn how to communicate with technical people, or learn how to set up systems to make this work. So in my case, for example, my business partner Paul is much more technical than me, so he does almost all of the communicating with the developers on the team,
Mm-hmm.
because he simply, he speaks their language better than I do. And I think that's a much better, you know,
So what kind of technical skill, like where do you draw the line, because you talk about some skills but not others, etc. Like where do you draw the line personally?
yeah, well, you know, um, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure where that line is, but I did learn how to do the very basic stuff, like, I can create a website and publish a website. I can do anything where you can basically follow a manual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can install whatever, a membership script, and then set it up so that people can buy stuff and become members and so on. But I don't know, if you show me the PHP code of that membership script, I can't do anything there, right? I know some basic CSS, just because if you've built as many websites as I have, you almost can't avoid learning some basic CSS, but it's really very basic. So I think you have to, if that's the discussion, I think you do have to, if you're working online, and especially if you're developing software, you have to have like the bare minimum of knowledge, where you don't think that your phone is powered by magic, right? You have to have the bare minimum technical understandings of how these things work, kind of. But you don't have to have the depth of knowledge where you can actually create this stuff.
Usually my answer to the consultants we have is that you need to know exactly what can be done, because you're the marketer and you're supposed to give the vision. And therefore, if you don't know what technically can be done, you cannot even have a proper vision.
Right.
And so I like the idea of like knowing what can be done, and knowing what can be done with Ajax and jQuery and all of that. Knowing what can be done, I don't know how to do it.
Right.
But I know that I can create like great sliders with like different things entering at different times, etc., and that can shape my vision. But it doesn't necessarily. I don't need to know how to do that. I can usually get people that cost a lot less than me per hour to do that, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like some people, and also like one, I guess, in terms of like learning how to design stuff, where would you put the line? Because, sometimes you need to make like emails and all of that, and are you going to use a designer for every little bit of design you need?
Well, I have kind of a little bit of a design background. So as a kid, at some point, I started practicing drawing, and I did some photography for a while, and I like design, right? So I know my way around Photoshop and stuff like that. So I actually do too much of the design work myself in my business, and it's not very good. I mean, my design isn't good, but it's good enough. It's passable.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for anything that's important, I need to hire someone else, right?
Yeah.
Because
I guess it's kind of like a trade-off of flexibility against specialization.
yeah,
The more you specialize, the more you rely on other people,
yeah,
which means creating a newsletter sometimes it becomes longer. Because imagine, like, for example, I know absolutely nothing about Photoshop.
right,
And as soon as I need to, like, for example, we have this blog post and we have that custom image on top, well, I need to use our designer or anything like that. And that just literally multiplies by 2 the time needed to produce a blog post, right?
yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a trade-off you need to make, and especially if you're just running your own business, it can be tricky. Sometimes you might want to touch a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I encourage like anyone. That's absolutely right. But it can be, especially if you're very bootstrappy and you can't just hire designers left and right, and you're doing stuff on your own. It's very useful if you can do some basic design stuff yourself, and not have to rely on other people. What I encourage people, if you're in that situation, and you want to get this like basic good enough design type skill, the only thing you need to learn is you need to learn about minimalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you can, forget about colors and Photoshop and Illustrator and all that kind of thing. Learn how to work with typography and white space, and you can create, you can create good enough. You can create very compelling design using just typography and spaces. Yeah. If you understand this kind of minimalism, you can be very effective without having to, spend years and years acquiring all these skills. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, because what's really bad is if someone who doesn't understand, design stuff like how to use colors and so on, and they start making pictures, right? That's bad. And this is what often happens with, if you give people, this is something that's kind of relevant to me because of the theme thing. One of the things we're always thinking about, we want to give people flexibility, but we don't want to give them so much flexibility that they can completely mess it up. Because if you give someone who's not a designer all these design tools and you say, here's this amazing thing where you can create anything you want, you can create any layout you want, you can choose the colors and everything. I mean, 99% of the people are going to make a website that looks absolutely horrifyingly bad.
I think a good example of that is actually it's like you talked about this in your blog as well, all these landing page creation softwares. And you look at a software like Lead Pages where you can't change too much.
Exactly.
And you look at something like Unbounce on the other side, where you can do pretty much anything. You can write your CSS, you can do all of that.
Exactly.
And as a result, actually, I was checking several people I gave both softwares to. And actually people that have less flexibility with Lead Pages were generating like twice more leads or something.
Right. Yeah.
Because they couldn't fuck it up,
Exactly. And that's Lead Pages is a perfect example, right? Lead Pages can be so frustrating because you're like, I can't even have a line of text down here. I just can't. But the upside of it is you cannot make that look ugly.
And it converts.
And it converts, yeah.
All right. So I guess I'm gonna finish with two a little bit broader questions.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the next one is hey, what do you think about the future of remarketing? And do you think marketers in general will go more towards that? And if so, is there opportunities for people watching this video?
I talked before about how people are terrible about making predictions.
Yeah.
And this is just something where I don't think that I can say anything more relevant or more useful about this than anyone else. I just don't know.
Okay. Well, what's your opinion on this?
I don't know. It's something that I just haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't it's something I haven't. I really feel like I can't give a useful answer to that.
No worries. So if you had to do all of this business building around IM impact again and even system marketing, is there one thing you change, one big thing compared to what you've done so far?
Yeah, I think what I do is, one of the problems, especially with IM Impact, is that it started out as, when it started out, I had no idea what I was doing, right? And really, if you look at IM Impact, it's the kind of blog that I actually tell people not to create, because it's just kind of a blog that's, I write about all sorts of stuff. It's not really very clear what the actual focus is. There's content on too wide a variety of topics really, and it's not a blog that is focused on serving a specific business. It's more like a blog that's just there, and then I have a couple of products attached to the back of that. But if I started now all over again, I would start right away with products basically, or service or something. I would try to find people who could become my customers, try to find out what they want, start selling them something, and then I would start blogging, and I would have a blog that is completely there to serve that business. It's completely there to serve that existing business. Because that's not how I started, right? And that's the reason why I don't have this setup with I Am Impact, because I started not knowing what to do, and I kind of, after a while came to realize these things. And yeah, I think, knowing what I know now, I could just cut down the time it took me to get to a decent level of income and a decent level of success. I could cut that down by several years. But those were the learning years, right? It's not that I regret that, but I could be a lot more efficient by focusing on getting customers right away and doing everything. It's like an upside down approach, right? Instead of thinking, here's all the stuff I need to build in order to get to the point where I can have some customers, I would go the other way around. I go say, here's the end goal, the customer making this sale, and then build backwards from there.
Yeah. Okay, I think that makes sense. Do you want to add anything for the end of this interview?
That's all.
All right, great. Well, thanks for being with us. Check out Shane's blog, imimpact.com. Check out his main product, How We Connect. I actually released a review about it not too long ago. And thank you for checking out the podcast.
Okay.
Bye, Shane.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.